It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jennifer Ann Gordon. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Actually, we looked it up. You were on the video show in November of 2020, so you were one of our first guests because we started that show in August of 2020.
I didn't realize I was one of your first guests. That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, we'd been on for what? August, September, October, November, 3 months. So you were definitely in the first
the early
50,
stages.
the early stages of it. That was like smack in the middle of COVID, basically. Yeah,
it was. You know, I feel like it was all like very blurry in those days, where it's just like every day ran into the other day, and so what. You said I was on in October of 2020? November. So I had weirdly just gotten married mid-COVID.
Oh.
During that time, I got married on Halloween of 2020, mid-COVID. So it was just such a weird time, and I think in everybody's lives. But I was happy to be on your show. It gave me some kind of normalcy for a moment.
Well, what a great day to get married on Halloween. I never thought of that, but...
I hate to say it, so Halloween of 2020 was a Saturday and it was a full moon. So my husband and I, before the pandemic ever happened, we thought that's the perfect day to get married. We both love Halloween. We both love costumes. We wanted to do this whole thing where it was like a costume party / wedding. And obviously that didn't happen, but we couldn't give up that wedding anniversary of it was a full moon, it was Halloween, it was a Saturday. So we got married just all by ourselves with the person doing the ceremony and the 2 people that owned the haunted bed and breakfast that we were staying in. There were no other guests.
Were you guys dressed as pumpkins?
Oh gosh, no, but I feel like I probably looked like a pumpkin. But we were a little bit more on the Viking side of it. We got married out in the woods on like this weird druid stone, and my husband wore a cape with like a fur collar, and I wore like a long purple dress with a cape. It was freezing because it had snowed where we live in New Hampshire, so I was also wearing snow boots and like fleece pants underneath my wedding dress.
As I remember you being from New Hampshire, because I grew up in Boston and lived in New Hampshire for 20 years.
Yeah, so you can have a pre-Halloween snowstorm.
Oh, it can snow, yeah. I remember it snowing on Columbus Day.
Oh, so, I know.
And I kind of miss it. I mean, I don't miss the piles and piles of snow. But I miss the change of seasons because in Vegas, where I am now, and I've been here since 2005, there's 2 seasons. There's
hot and hotter.
Well, there's hot and not so hot.
Right.
Because the winter is comfortable here. I love the winter. It's fantastic. Well,
I'll say I've only been to Vegas one time in my life, and I was visiting friends, and they were lovely, and they had this great house. And the first day I was there, I was just like, it's too hot. I'm going to die. It's too hot. I can't live with this. And they said, well, wait till the sun goes down. You're going to feel like it's much colder. And I'm like, I doubt it. And then lo and behold, day 3, the sun went down and I was like wearing a big fuzzy robe outside at their house, like feet in the pool. And I'm like, oh, it's too cold to swim. And they said, what temperature do you think it is right now? And I said, I don't know, like in the 60s. And it was 102.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But it was just so dry that it wasn't overwhelming once the sun went down.
It takes a bit of getting used to. Coming from New England, and when I got here, I'm still not completely content with the weather.
Sunshine.
Well, yeah, and it's very dry, and there just isn't a real feeling of change of season. And, like I said, it's just not as hot. But anyways, we got to get on
enough about the weather.
Enough about the weather. We got to get on to other things. So you are an author and a podcast host. I wanted to talk about podcasting generally speaking, if you don't mind. But let's cover your book first, because that's really why you're here.
I know. I'm always like, oh, yeah, I have a book.
Okay,
I have a bunch.
So the new one is called The Japanese Box. Is that correct?
Yes. So August 1st, I had a release through Last Waltz Publishing, which is called The Japanese Box and Other Stories. It is a small collection of short stories that are too long to be really short stories. So this is why they're in a collection together.
Okay. Now, you're primarily a horror writer. Is that correct?
Yes. And this collection is definitely horror based, even though I will say the flagship story, the story called The Japanese Box, started in a memoir writing class, and it started as a personal essay about a night that when I was about 10 years old, and my dad took out a lot of his memorabilia from when he served in the Korean War and when he was, on leave in Japan and all of these things. So it started as a personal essay about this really amazing night with my dad when he finally kind of opened up to me about what it was like to be in a war and to be away from home and all of these things. And I realized it got so personal that the only way for me to cope with that was just to turn it into a horror story. So R.I.P. my dad. Thank goodness he's not still alive to be like, oh, so you just turn this into horror? But it was easier. It was easier for me to say, let's add a ghost, as opposed to let's just deal with this raw emotion of you and your dad.
Well, you don't think he would have liked the book?
Actually, I know he would have loved it in his way, but my father was very, very New England, so compliments did not roll off the tongue.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and he was also a lot older than my mom, so he was weirdly this different generation from even any of my friends' parents. So I think he would have liked it, but it if I could channel my dad, I think he would have said something like, "Don't get so sentimental about this." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay, all right, whatever that means. Okay, I'll add a ghost." So I added a ghost.
How many books do you have published at this point?
So I have 4 novels. 3 of them are very short novels. So I have Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, which was my debut novel, which won the Kindle Award for Best Horror of 2020. Wow. I have a 2 short novel duet called the Hotel series, which includes From Daylight Till Madness and When the Sleeping Dead Still Talk. So those are 2 books, but really they are one story. And then I have my novel Pretty Ugly, which came out in, I want to say, July of 2021. Again, this is pandemic time, so difficult to know. And then I have The Japanese Box, which is a collection which just recently came out.
Okay, yeah, because it says The Japanese Box and Other Stories. So this is a collection of short stories?
Yes, it's a collection of 3 short stories and 1 very long poem.
Okay.
I know people are like, oh, the moneymaker, poetry. But I promise it all makes sense when they're put together.
Well, we did mention podcasting, and you said that you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about podcasting, generally speaking.
I love podcasting. I love my podcast.
Okay, well, you've got one, and it's called Vox Vomitus, which I love the title.
Thank you.
When did you start that? Did you have that when you were on in 2020?
I did, but I think it was also very new. So Vox Vomitus started in the beginning of July of 2020. When the lockdown happened and the pandemic happened, a lot of people had to do a real quick pivot career-wise. I was a professional ballroom dance teacher and a writer. But then I very much immediately switched to I'm a writer and now a podcast host. So jokingly, I came up with this idea of a podcast called Vox Vomitus, which is fake Latin for word vomit. and I wanted to, with my co-host Allison Martine, we wanted to talk to people not about what went right, but what went really wrong during the process of writing their books or screenplays or comics or anything. So that's how that was born. And, I didn't realize then what a profound impact that would have on my life. The people I meet are incredible. The things I've learned are incredible. And the show is, it's kind of found a following, which I love. And it's led to other opportunities, which is always great.
Where am I going to start with this? Because I have very opinionated views about podcasting, and I haven't heard yours, so I'm not going to make a comment.
Oh, well, thank you.
In any way, one way or the other. There was a point where I wrote a book, and it's 23 pages long, so I don't think it counts as an actual book. I'll call it
like a hardy pamphlet.
I'll call it a pamphlet. Yeah, and the title is "Don't Do a Podcast." And it's satirical. It's done in a very tongue-in-cheek, sort of sarcastic way. But there is a serious message there, because there seems to be an overabundance of podcasts. And my reason, along with everything else, because this gets into the generalization of media, where, there is just so much stuff out there because everything has been democratized with the internet, And I'm not convinced that, it's good and bad. It's like the double-edged sword. The good news is the same as the bad news. Okay. But where I'm leading with this is, what was your reasoning for starting this podcast, aside from being locked in your house? Was it simply just, I need something else to do?
No, weirdly for me and for my co-host, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she and I talk all the time. We are like, book best friends. We both had our first novels published with the same small press. It was lockdown. We didn't have that opportunity for us as writers to go on a book tour at that time.
Okay.
And we also, I also just think we as like debut authors, you don't know what you're doing. And we wanted, like, jokingly one night, I was like, what if we could just talk to people who are the best in their craft, are New York Times bestselling authors, and ask them, like, how did you feel when you made mistakes? What do you feel like when you write those like 9 chapters and you go, these are all terrible, I just have to delete them? So it started from there, because we could not talk to other people in person. We couldn't go to writers' conferences and make friends in person with people. So we came up with this idea, and yeah, it might not be super original. Maybe at the time it was kind of original, but at this point we have a cult following, and we have authors who are, who come back every time they have a new book. We have plenty of authors who are like begging to be on our show, which I never thought in my life would happen. And we've kind of just, we've come up with our own thing, like, because at the end of the day, Allison, Martine, and I are both writers, but we're also fans of reading more than anything else. So when we read a book and we get excited about it, and we know we have the author on, we'll theme up our outfits for the show, we'll bring food on the show, drinks on the show, and it's almost like prop comedy meets a literary podcast.
Oh, okay. So you're doing video as well with the show.
We do video and audio.
Okay, great.
And then so our live broadcasts, they get like, pretty good, decent viewers. But then, like, I know a lot of people just listen to it, so we make sure to say, like, what you don't see is Jennifer's wearing a top hat and Allison has a fake parrot on her shoulder. Like, watching it is an experience, listening to it's an experience. But we went into it out of like a really pure place of absolute love, and also complete misunderstanding of what even the writing world was truly like, because we got published and then the world shut down.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that the reason that you started yours was very similar to the reason that I started the video show. The idea was to do it for authors who couldn't get out and do book tours because of the pandemic.
Right.
So we were going to do a virtual book tour, if you will. And that's how the video show started, and it did really well. The podcast that you're currently on is completely separate from that. I do two different shows. And this is one thing that I wanted to do, was to keep them separate, because most people, like you, do a video version of the audio, okay?
Yes.
And that's what I didn't want to do. I don't know, just to be different. Not that I was trying to be,
I know, I'm not trying to be different, but we all come to it from like a different way, where it's like, okay, we're going to have two different shows, two different things.
Yeah, they don't overlap, because my original intention was that the podcast already had a following, and it wasn't authors, because I was a musician, and that's where the show started with the podcast, is I would promote indie music artists, because I am one, and it came out of this, like all the great inventors, they found something and said, I can do one better than that, and they did, hopefully. So that started in like 2014, 15. Before that, I was on FM, okay? So I kind of knew what I was doing. But when the podcast craze hit, I said, you know what, I'll take this out on the road myself, because I got into too many arguments with station managers. And I swear station managers are the same as record label. They are just cut from this evil cloth. And
see, I mean, I don't know anything about that, but I feel like if we just talk about corporate anything, we could put that in there. Like,
it goes right under that umbrella. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I will say my podcast, Vox Vomitus, and just me being on a lot of different podcasts over the years has led to really great experiences for me, just meeting people. I've also recently become a co-host for the House of Mystery show on NBC Radio.
Oh, great. Great.
So, I mean, and it's not every night, even though the show runs every night. I'm on a couple times a month, maybe 3 times a month. And that's just, it's new. But I like that, because that's also just audio. So I don't have to do my makeup.
Well, it's a much more relaxed
I still do.
Yeah.
but I don't have to.
Well, that's great. And that is the good part about doing this, is the people you meet. I mean, that's certainly the best aspect of it for me. But
it's definitely the best aspect for me, because I mean, I just to bring this, I'm going to go full circle back to my book, The Japanese Box. I have a cover blurb from my very favorite author, Josh Mallerman, and I wouldn't have known him had he not been a guest on my podcast, and we didn't become friends after that. So I just feel like podcasting, talking to other creatives, whether they be writers, musicians, anything, photographers, painters. This is how we as creatives, we refuel ourselves.
Well, okay. All right. I get that. It becomes like a forum for people to meet, essentially. And the only difference is you're recording it so that other people watch it. Right. Okay. The one conversation that I wanted to bring up, and then we got to kind of wind it down because we're already running over, but that's all right.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm very long-winded.
I knew this would be more than 15, which is fine because I don't have a limit on the podcast particularly. I try to break it in increments of 15, 30, 45, so that's okay. The video show, I got to keep to a 15-minute format because we found on YouTube that that's about it for people on YouTube.
They stop watching.
They stop watching. So, but my point is, back in the day, and I know I'm going to sound like the grumpy old man on the park bench, bitching at the world, but perhaps there's some truth to that analogy. Back in the day when there was 3 channels, NBC, ABC, CBS, specifically with news, and, now with the world on fire, it really hits home with this concept. Everybody watched the same news, okay? Everybody. Now, everybody might not agree with what it was, particularly, but the news was presented in a way that was pretty much unbiased.
Right.
Okay.
We believed that that's what was happening.
That's
because
what
we
was
had
happening.
That was what was happening.
Right. When
it
you
was not
watched
biased,
Walter
supposedly.
Cronkite,
Right.
you were like, okay, this is the deal. This is what's happening. Now, it left it up to you to decide how you felt about it. Okay? You would be outraged at what you saw or happy for what you saw, whatever, okay? But everybody saw the same film, and everybody could talk about it in a collective form. And it was a unifier for the world, for the country, for the people, for the society. Now, everything is spoon-fed to you. You don't have to make up your mind. They'll make it up for you. And depending on if you're a liberal or a conservative, there are the pigeonholes that you can go to where and that's why I like Vox Vomitus, because they'll just spew out what you agree with to you. And it's on both sides. We can name names. I mean, if you're a conservative, they go to Fox or they go to Newsmax. If they're liberal, they go to MSNBC or CNN. And what I find funny is that I'll go to all of them and watch the exact same story, and it's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say, like, without getting into specifically what I feel and believe, I way back in the day, I went to school for theater, so I would call a lot of what I would say, television news. They do run the same stories, but it's all on how they're reading their lines. So it's based on what character they're choosing to be while covering the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And as a viewer, as somebody who's looking at it, and this is not me, but somebody who's looking at news as entertainment, you're going to gravitate towards whatever characters you like best. I mean, it might as well be a soap opera or a reality TV show.
So what you're saying is that the news is secondary to the commentator?
I think certain news is secondary to the commentator. And I say this as someone who, during the pandemic, and a lot of things happened in our world, in our country, and they're still happening, but I got very maxed out on television news. Like I still very much read the news, but I subscribe to multiple different newspapers, and I will read all of them. And then when I have questions, I do my own research, but I realized, and this is even for me, who, like I'll openly admit, like I lean liberal, but I didn't want to be that person who's like, well, I just like so-and-so, so I like whatever they tell me.
Well, that unfortunately seems to be, I hate to say the majority, but a good chunk of the media consumer.
No, and I agree with that. Like, I agree that that's what's happening.
And I think it's causing the division.
This is why, like, as an author and as somebody who's promoting literature, like, sometimes you need a break. Not like you need a break from the real world, but sometimes it's good to just take a beat and focus on artwork and in a real human voice that might not have an agenda.
Well, I agree. And
I'm from New England. Like politics are like what we do all day, every day. I've worked for a lobbying firm in the past, a local lobbying firm. And so like politics is something I very, very much am passionate about. But
I think,
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know how to wrap that up with any kind of moral note. So
I know.
But here's,
I'm like, well, how to wrap it up? I've got a really cute dog.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. I think that's what's causing a lot of the division, because you mentioned New England being very political, and I remember getting in conversations with my friends, but it was at a time before this whole media thing went out of its mind. Okay, I left in 2005, and 2005 was just when it was
starting to ramp up.
It was starting to ramp up, and then this is when everybody started doing a podcast. Okay, that really was about the time it started. Because I think Rogan started in 2007.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, and YouTube came around in 2007. And so, I mean, it was right at that, just before it all exploded. Okay.
Yeah, the moment where it was like everyone can have a voice, and everyone can have a voice, and everyone should have a voice, but...
Well, that brings up another
it can
question.
Get scary. This is why I talk about books.
Well, yeah, and then that's another Pandora's box question, but you said everyone should have a voice. I'm not sure I agree with that. But maybe we'll leave that.
Oh, well, I know. No, yeah, not everyone should have a voice. Yeah, never mind that.
Maybe we'll leave that for another show. Yeah, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Buy The Japanese Box and Other Stories by Jennifer Ann Gordon.
There we go. Okay, well, listen, I know we could have gone on forever and ever. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. You're always so fun to talk to, and you always have such great questions. And even though we went like off the rails a little bit, I like that because I always just really enjoy the fact when people talk off the cuff and don't just give me the same questions over and over again. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. So The Japanese Box has been released?
It was released August 1st. It became an instant Amazon bestseller.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Last question. Give out your website, please.
Oh, it is www.jenniferannegordon.com, and that's JenniferAnnegordon. So that's Anne with an E, like Anna Green Gables.
Okay.
JenniferAnnegordon.com. It's got all my stuff on there, my links to Vox Vomitus, links to all my books, my artwork, some other random fun stuff.
Well, thanks again. I'm sure, we will have you back on the show at some point. You're one of Mickey's clients, right?
I am one of Mickey's clients.
Yeah. So we've been working with Mickey since we started the show.
Yes, Mickey with Creative Edge Publicity.
Yeah, and he has been providing us with wonderful guests for the past 3 years for the video show.
He's really amazing.
Yeah.
So, like every time Mickey's like, "Do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And Mickey and I have known each other now for so many years, and he knows the kind of interviews I like and the people I like to talk to, which is just like really fun, interesting conversations. And so thank you for being one of those people.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, listen, you're welcome back on the show anytime.
Thank you so much.